to the next installment of our Living Legends podcast. We've been doing quite a bit of interviews, those connected to our church, both directly and indirectly. And I'm excited today for this installment with the famed and the amazing Kenny Williams. This has been a conversation I've been looking forward to, but I'll let you do a bit of introduction, because I imagine there may be some that may not know exactly what it is that you do. So how would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, certainly not as a living legend and what fame, all of that, all those things that you said. I'm just a guy that, came from Berkeley, California, then to San Jose, and happened to do a little something in sports along the way, being pushed by my mother and father to excel in school. Otherwise, I could not set foot on the baseball or basketball or football fields. Kind of did well enough to go to the next level and then the next level. And, fortune sometimes shines upon you and you make the most of your opportunities. And, here I sit now. Somebody just said the other day that that I became this year, or last October, I became the longest serving African-American man to lead a major sports organization in history, any sports organization. So I didn't realize that. I had to have our people look that up, verified it. Turns out it's true. So, just continuing to grind away and, trying to bring another World Series championship to the city of Chicago.
Well, that's my home city. So, I totally appreciate that. But, I think that kind of leans into like the idea of legends, legacy, especially in this month, as we're trying to be intentional to highlight the stories that are already in continuation, not just, history that has happened a long time ago, but there's some things that are happening amazingly right now. And so you spoke of your parents, amazing Jerry Williams, who passed not too long ago, and then, of course, your mother, Ethel, who are connected to our church. But thinking about this, I think every kid's dream is to go into professional sports. When did you figure out, like, this was actually a real possibility for you?
Football wise, I actually thought that was a possibility very early on. That kind of happens when you're kind of running past everyone and find yourself in the end zone quite a bit. And you gain that confidence along the way. So I thought that was something that was easily attainable. And then, I got a baseball and football scholarship to Stanford. And I only ended up playing 1 year of football there because, interestingly enough, I was playing minor league baseball at the same time I was playing college football.
Okay.
And it got to be a little bit too much, especially at that particular institution. And somehow the failure of my first year in baseball, I hit 248, which is not bad by today's standards, but hit 248 and struck out 150 some odd times my first year. And somehow that failure kind of drew me more towards the sport. Interestingly enough, football, I felt like, it was pretty easy. But baseball, I felt like I wanted to conquer that and was drawn to it. I grew to regret that decision, a few years. I made it to the big leagues and played for 6 years for, in Chicago first, then Detroit, Toronto, and Montreal. But it certainly wasn't the playing career that I thought. But, it's funny how strange things happen along the way, because had I not, and I have no regrets, because the one thing that I've always done is I've given it, whatever I was pursuing, everything that I had towards accomplishing the goal. That way, if you happen to not achieve that goal, you can look at yourself in the mirror and you know you gave it your all,
Yeah.
which brings you peace and allows you then to move on to whatever's next in your life. But while I was there sulking on the bench in Toronto, because I wasn't getting a chance to play, um, I sat next to two people. One, the pitching coach, his name was Galen Cisco. The other is the manager, Cito Gaston, who um, was the first Black manager that I had ever played for.
Wow.
And won back-to-back World Series in Toronto and should be in the Hall of Fame. It's a shame that he's not in the Hall of Fame. Other people that have won a couple of World Series are in the Hall of Fame, I'm just saying. Yeah. Anyway, sitting next to them and them being so gracious to answer all the questions that I had as a board player, not getting a chance to play, actually turned out to be the biggest blessing I could have professionally. Well, maybe not the biggest, because I subsequently got other opportunities. But had I not spent that time learning from them, I do not believe that I would be sitting in this chair now, because I wouldn't have been prepared for other opportunities after my playing days were over.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that leans well into, like you've kind of spoken to, but what are some of the biggest challenges you recall, either from getting into Major League, baseball, to being in Major League, and even the transition, right? Like, I imagine there are a variety of things that were seminal in that process.
Well, while I was my first 2 years in the major leagues, but a lot of people don't know this, but I stayed in Chicago during the off seasons, and I actually worked in the Bulls front office, the Chicago Bulls front office.
Really?
This is when in the Bulls heyday, and when Michael and Scotty first came along. So it was a little strange having, a major league player working in their front office, and I'm hanging out with Michael and Scotty and those guys after games and stuff, because I'm still in that circle of professional athlete, but I'm also a marketing intern answering phones at the time. But the interesting thing is the owner of the Bulls, Jerry Reinsdorf, remembered that when I was done playing, remembered that I showed up for work. At the Bulls front offices. He owned the Bulls and the White Sox. He still owns them. And he remembered that work ethic, and he remembered, the sacrifices, that I made to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that went a long way in him asking me to come back to the organization when I was done playing. But you mentioned specifically of, some of those, the earlier challenges. Hey, Pastor, listen, there's been a lot along the way. And, it's hard to pick a chapter in which to answer that question fully, whether it be from the physical sacrifices you have to make, to become the player first, or the transitional decisions you have to make when you become a young father, and then all of a sudden someone calls you in the office and says your playing days are over, to then transitioning into some of the scouting roles and the player development roles. I ran the minor leagues operations for the White Sox before I started running the major league operations. And there was 1 year, my ex-wife, who was probably one of the reasons why she's my ex-wife, turned to me and said, you've been gone 265 days, 69 days this year. You've been on the road. And I said I knew it had been a lot, but I didn't know it had been that much, and you're just trying to hustle and pay the bills and grind away, and like I said, If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it and do it to the best of my ability. I'm not going, if I fail, it ain't going to be because I didn't put the effort into it.
Yeah.
Which leads me to, and I know you didn't ask this question, but it's the greatest advice I've ever gotten. And that came from my father. And I had thought that I had told him this years and years ago, but it wasn't until, the last couple of weeks of his life in the hospital where, I thanked him again for the advice this particular advice he gave me. Geometry was never my thing. I don't get it at all. And I got the worst grade in school I've ever got. I got a D. Wow. Which meant in my family, you don't get to play sports and stuff. That's just, hey, you're out till you figure it out. So anyway, I remember having the conversation with him, and he said, well, you think everybody in your class is that much smarter than you? You got the D. I'm sure other people are getting A's and B's. And I said something smart, something to the effect of, well, evidently, the evidence is here. They are smarter. That didn't go over too well with Jerry Williams.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So, but instead of getting popped in the head, which I totally expected and would have warranted, he said something that has stuck with me the rest of my life, and even sitting here now, and that's, if you think those people are twice as smart as you, then you can catch up by working twice as hard. And what happens if you work 3 times as hard? Won't you be above them?
Wow.
And I thought about it, and it sounded reasonable to me. And from that day forward, there are very few people that I can say have worked harder than me at a particular juncture in my life. And sometimes I took it to the extreme, and I realized that we have to sometimes learn how to strike balance in our life.
Yeah.
And that can be more challenging for people with limited intellectual ability, such as myself.
You just got to work twice or 3 times as hard at it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that's a simple concept, but it worked. It worked for me.
Yeah.
It worked for me, and I don't profess to ever have been the smartest person in any of these boardrooms or anything that I've been in. Oftentimes I've been the most logical, but the one thing that I've been able to do was outwork people.
Yeah. Wow. And that is just amazing advice. I mean, from just the idea of number one, coming from your father, where I think that takes on a special tenure for a variety of reasons, but also for it to be able to, at a moment where you were kind of at your lowest, like, hey, I got this terrible grade, this could be defining, oh, this is who I am. And then your father kind of re-pitching it, shifting your view about it. And all of a sudden, this kind of trajectory towards your work ethic, it just kind of explodes, which is amazing.
It was easy for him to say that, but then my mother had to be the one to monitor that and to hold my feet to the fire, which wasn't always easy to do, But without those 2 people, listen, man, I'm not sitting, in this chair. And my grandmother and my grandmother's prayers.
Yeah.
My grandmother's prayers, because I had a lot of questions, especially, she kept me in church, man. I didn't know you could go to church this much. Whenever she had me, though, it was like, we just left church. We're going back. And she swears that, it wasn't like that. I'm like, oh yeah, it wasn't. I would have all these questions and stuff. And she just, she say, boy, I'm gonna pray for you. I'm gonna pray for you. And it's not lost on me.
Yeah.
That I've been the beneficiary of good fortune.
Yeah,
Because you listen, there are a lot of people that work hard. There are a lot
absolutely.
of smart people. There are a lot of people who are educated
Mhm.
and have greater qualities than I do. But I do understand this, that good fortune doesn't shine on everyone.
Absolutely.
Good fortune doesn't shine on everyone. So I'll be the last one to say that my grandmother's prayers didn't work.
Mm, mm. Man, you fill me with so much, so many questions to get to from that, and so we will. But I just want to make sure that we at least kind of communicate. So after your transition out of playing professional baseball, what are some of the positions that you held that led to where you are today?
So I thought I was going to go back to Stanford, finish my degree, which I promised my mother when I left early. I promised her I would do, and I still haven't done that.
Still
Uh,
time. There's still time.
yeah, no, time's out. I'm just gonna have to. She's gonna have to just accept this apology. You're gonna have to accept this apology. Anyway, um, uh, I lost my train of thought right
No
now.
worry. I was the positions after after baseball.
So I was going back, and I thought I was added as a player. I had a choice between going to Japan to play,
Okay.
or going back to school.
Mhm.
And I was living in Seattle at the time, and called Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the Bulls, because Michael Jordan had changed his phone number.
Mm.
And the Bulls were coming out to play Seattle, and I wanted to,
And I just want to slap this up there. Like, don't run past the fact that you have Michael Jordan's phone number. Like that thing might have just blown my mind in and of itself. But anyway.
So I called the owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, and got Michael's number, and he says, well, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm considering a couple of different things, blah, blah, blah. And we just got into a general conversation. And I said, the one thing that you guys aren't doing in baseball is you're not scouting the inner cities.
Mm.
You're not, there's some kids, some Black talent in these and Latin talent in these inner cities that are being ignored because of the bias that a lot of the scouts have, or fear of going into these places, whatever. So, a few minutes into the conversation, he said, well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is, and why don't you come and run our inner city scouting if you feel that strongly about it? And I said, well, that's an interesting thought. Thought about it a little further, and I agreed to do that.
Wow.
And a couple of years later, he saw that I had a little bit more to offer, and asked me to be his special assistant, because he wanted to right some things that were going on in the organization, and felt that he had a lot of yes men around, just telling him what he wanted to hear. And he knew that wasn't going to be the case with me. I think he regrets that oftentimes. But that's kind of how it started. So I was involved in a lot of the business side of things, as well as the baseball side of things initially, television, radio, contract negotiations. And for whatever reason, I've always had some instincts in reading people in that area, marketing and sales part of things. And then a couple of years after that, we were in a meeting, and we were dissatisfied with how the minor leagues were running. And he asked me to run the minor leagues. And I said, I didn't have any interest in that. And, he said, okay, but let's go to this meeting. And then after the meeting, you tell me. And we went to this meeting where the minor league people got up and, did their presentations. And I leaned over to him and said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I'll fix that.
Wow.
I'll fix that. And so I did that for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And then the general manager Ron Schuler decided that he had enough of the position. It's a very taxing position. He had enough, and he was leaving. And Jerry asked me if I had any interest in it, and I told him no. And he said, "Are you kidding me? Nobody says no to this position." I said, yeah, well, it's been my observation that, a lot of people are smart before they get that job, and then they become the village idiot, after they get that job. And a couple of years after that, they're out the door and on the street and never get it. And I'm interested, I've got young kids. I'm interested in a longer career trajectory.
Yeah.
And I see more opportunity on the business side than I do the baseball side. So he said the magic words that I need you. And that was October of 2000. So here we are 22 years later. I'm not the GM anymore. I was elevated to a position that oversees the general manager, executive vice president. Most teams call it president of baseball operations. So you'll see both titles associated with me. And it's a little slower paced than the general manager's job. But I still retain last say so on all personnel matters, around here. I've taken an almost invisible approach to the media and stuff. So I'm not out there as much as I used to be. But that general manager's, job, I slept for 3.5 years. That's 3.5 hours a night on average for 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah. It can be tough.
Yeah, that sounds like it. And so you mentioned earlier how like you're one of the longest tenured African Americans in this level of leadership. I believe you said professional sports, not just baseball, correct? And so,
well, at least the four major: baseball, basketball, football. What's the other? Baseball, basketball, football, and soccer.
Yeah.
No, hockey.
Hockey, yeah. So I want to say not too long ago, maybe a few years back, you actually spoke out about the lack of diversity as it relates to the major league. What kind of did you say, and what has been kind of like the movement since your communication?
Well, the interesting thing is I've been saying the same things for 20 years. And I've been on the diversity committee for Major League Baseball for the bulk of the 20 years, and now I serve as the actual chairman of the committee for baseball. But I was taught, my mother, my father. I remember conversations they used to have with John Carlos, my godfather, who raised his hand in the '68 Olympics. And those conversations with my mother's struggles at PG&E, my father's in the fire department and having to sue the fire department to become, it's kind of ironic to have to sue a department to be able to risk your life. John's struggles and all of the things that they all used to talk about, and I was listening. And it's you listen and you learn, and you establish a kind of a foundation as to who you are and what you are. They all said, educate yourself and fight from inside the boardroom out, not from outside the boardroom in. Right? It's a better fight if you position yourself in those boardrooms. So I did that for a number of years, right? Where maybe some people would say, well, why isn't he speaking out as much as he could given his position? I was, and I affected change behind those scenes in so many ways people have no idea. But I started to not see any more progress, and not with those same arguments I was having behind the scenes. So I walked into the general manager's meeting in November of 21, and there were 130 people there, and there were 3 of us were Black. I was the only one in the position, that I currently serve.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of Latinos and a couple of women.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is that? 6 people, 6 people. Everybody else looked the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was asked to give some history on another subject. And so I stood in the room, I looked around and I said, I want you guys to close your eyes. And imagine you've been walking in this room for 30 years. And the room was all Black. Everybody in here was Black. There's just a sprinkling of people that looked like you. And I went up to you and I said, man, I really believe in diversity. For 30 years, I believe in diversity, but we just can't find any qualified Black and brown people anywhere.
Mm.
How offensive would that be to you?
Mm.
How demoralizing would that be for you?
Mm-hmm.
How genuine would you take these statements of we believe in diversity?
Yeah.
So and one of my best friends, Brian Cashman, who is he's the general manager of the New York Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
We kid each other constantly. He timed it. And after he said you took the room for 8 minutes. 8 minutes. I was like, well, I didn't realize it was that long, but I had some things to get off my chest, and I hit him hard with it. And I told him, I said, this is the last time I'm going to ask or demand that this start to change. Mm. Because the next time I do come walk in this room and I see what I'm seeing right now, I'm going out here to this media, and you're going to have to deal with my sound bites for the next weeks, and you're going to have to answer to those sound bites in a much different way than you've ever had to answer.
And that's one.
So they came up with the next general managers meeting, every club was required to bring a person of color or a woman to be sitting at the table representing their club. And some other things resulted and I'm not saying that to say anything other than to just answer your question. Right. What are you doing? What's been done? All these things. Now, that comes with some risk. Mm-hmm. And I stated at the time, I'm to the point in my career, I do not care what happens to me as a result of these stances that I feel necessary to take. Because if it helps then the people behind me, then I will have accomplished the job at hand. And if, like I said, if that means that when I'm done in this position here, I go no further, or I've just got to fade off into the sunset, so be it. I will have spoken my piece.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, that's definitely some level of movement, right? Of course, like we want to see that trajectory move forward. But if you had to paint the picture, right? What would the room rightly look like if you were to walk into it and to be like, man, we've made it? Like,
shouldn't every room just mirror society? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not a hard concept to. I mean, you want quality people. You do not, and this is one of the hardest things that you try to balance when you're talking through these things. You don't want to hire people, and people don't want to get hired because of their color.
Absolutely.
Because of their gender. People don't want that. You want quality people for these positions, but you also have to give people an opportunity. Whereas they otherwise maybe wouldn't have gotten. And that goes both ways. If you got an all Black company, and you don't have people of different ethnicities and races in it, I don't think you're serving yourself well in that scenario either. I think you need a cross, blend of people and personalities and experiences to really get the job done.
Yeah, yeah. So then I've also recognized it just seems like major league sports is shifting, period. And I feel like, there's a time maybe 20 years, 30 years ago, like baseball came top of the hill. And, football was kind of coming. There seems to be a shifting in the guard. What are you sensing as it relates to young kids, especially African-American kids being connected to sports and their connection potentially to baseball?
Well, if you go on Major League Baseball's website, you'll see some amazing things happening with young Black and Latin men. U.S. and it's always the Latin men from other countries. Are 30% of more than 30% of Major League Baseball now. But here in the States, Black and brown are playing more than you're seeing some guys that in previous years, 10 years ago would be on the football field.
Yeah.
And those type of athletes, now they're coming into baseball, whether it be the health reasons and the concussion issues or whatever, but you're seeing a lot of positive things happening. And I just spoke with a group a few weeks ago. It's on Major League Baseball's website. Actually, they put a clip on it. And they're not just focused on them becoming major league players, which is one of the things that I demanded. They're focused on helping these young men build their character and educational pursuits along the way. We with the White Sox, we have a program called our ACE program in Chicago. And when we first started this program years ago, you're from Chicago, so you're familiar with the Robert Taylor homes.
Absolutely.
And State Street and all that.
Yeah, Ida B. Wells, Cabrini Green, all of them.
We couldn't, man. We sponsored these little leagues, and the gangs were stealing the bats and balls and stuff. It was terrible. It was like, we're never going to make any progress. And this. Anyway, we kept at it, and now we have had over 250 kids, inner city Chicago, get Division I, Division II scholarships.
Wow.
And some have gone on to get their masters in various fields, and play in the College World Series and do some really special things. So we're proud of that.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful. And to go back, I mean, you mentioned earlier, this positioning that you're in, the change that you're able to affect both inside the organization to communities around you. That is on the prayers of your grandmother. And so I wouldn't be right not to ask you, how has faith played a role kind of in your success and kind of where you are now?
Well, like I said, now I have to be honest in saying I got popped in the head a little bit because I had some questions.
Absolutely.
As a young kid, I had some questions about, this particular, story coming from the Bible, this particular one. I had questions, and, she promptly called me a heathen and popped me in the head. But listen, I think we've got kids running around the streets now, smash and grab. Is that what they call smash and grab?
It's like whole gangs. Yeah.
Yeah. Doing those kind of things and just kind of lost. And I think it's been lost in our upbringings. Taking your kids and getting them the foundation of the church, and not just the whole community of the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having that fear of God, fear of grandma, fear of Alice the neighbor, whomever that is, that thing, that voice, that consciousness that stops you and says, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not right. That's not godly. That's not holy. That's not how I've been raised.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where I may have wanted to listen, I was a 20-something-year-old Major League Baseball player, and I had some money in my pocket. You know, you can go left, you can go right.
Yeah.
In some cases, but I always knew, I was like, well, I was just going to reflect on my mother, my grandmother. What are they going to say? What is there? Oh, I'll tell you a story.
Please.
I'll tell you a story. Good story too. And it may take me a while to get back to where I need to get.
Over here.
So one of my players, I'm not going to mention his name.
Okay.
One of my players, you know, we really treated, I thought, very fairly. We won the World Series. I let him have my time on the podium to say goodbye. It was his last year, but to say goodbye to the city and everything. And that particular player then started to complain about how he was treated at the end of his career with us. So I said, listen, you can say anything you want about me. I don't care. I don't respect you enough to care. Don't you say anything. Don't you say anything about that man, the owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, because I've seen him do too much good for too many people. And I know he did some things for you personally. Okay. And anyway, so he criticized him once. I sent warning. He criticized him again, and I let him have it publicly. It was on ESPN for, a week. But after I said it, and I said some words on ESPN that my grandmother didn't like, right? Or first, actually, it was the congregation that let her know. So I'm driving home. After I said what I said on ESPN, and they're bleep, 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 bleep. Yeah. And she called me. She said, hey, baby, my congregation is calling me. And they're saying that you went on that ESP channel. I was like, it ain't ESP, it's ESP. I don't care what it is. You went on TV and you said all these cuss words, and you wasn't raised like that. I said, Grandma, listen, I'm 40 years, at the time I was 40 years, I'm 40 years old. This man did this. He had it coming. He's like, no. I don't care what he did. That don't have an effect on who you are and how you are going to be out. And you have kids watching you, and you are an example for them. And I kept pushing back. She says, oh, okay. So you want me to go get the switch and get on the airplane? I said, I'm 40 years old. She was, I don't know, she was 85, something like that. You want me to get on the airplane and come out? And I kept pushing back, and then she convinced me she was getting ready to get a flight. Get a flight. So I'm like, she said, you need to go on that ESP channel and apologize and do it. And you need to do it today. I'm like, I'll think about it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, I call our PR guy. No, I didn't. I didn't call our PR guy. I called Michael Wilbon, who does PTI. I said, hey, Mike, I know you saw what I said. He's like, oh, that was great. That was great. He deserved it. I said, well, listen, I got to go on air with you, and it wasn't the right thing to do. But he's like, Kenny, where's this coming from? I'm like, well, my grandmother. Honestly. So he's like, okay, we'll put you on tomorrow. So they put me on that little segment, 5 minutes on PTI with Kenny Williams, right? So I get on air and, hey, Kenny, you said some things yesterday. And so I said, listen, I'm going to apologize of how I said some things yesterday, because that's not who my family is. It's not representative of the position that I'm going to be in, blah, 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 blah. Okay, right. So then at the end of it, he says, well, I understand all that, Kenny, but what's the real reason? Why are you coming on? I was like, and I had to admit to America right there. I said, well, my grandmother's congregation got on her and she got on me. So I had to come on in.
For all those that don't believe in the power of the church. No,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That was worth it. That was worth it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, one last question. I always like to close off from the variety of things that you've accomplished, both playing, both, you know, in the front office, pushing for change. If you're thinking about it, if somebody's closing out watching this episode, how would you like them to remember your story, or what would you like them to remember most?
Ooh. Like when I'm dead?
No, like maybe just retirement or anything. You don't have to, you gotta die.
Yeah, well, I hope retirement's first. How would I like to be remembered?
Yeah.
Well, I want my family to be proud of, not necessarily, you know, the accomplishments that you have in life. Like I said, so much good fortune sometimes has to shine on you, that's out of your control. But I want them to understand the work ethic. You know, that's a tough question for me because you know, if I've got my family's respect, you know, and people in my close circle, you know, understand some of the things you had to go through to get to where it's easy for people to say, oh, you got it easy, but they don't remember when the day that I was named general manager in 2000, I went home and spray painted on the side of my house was "No niggas should be running the Chicago White Sox" in capital letters. Wow. People don't remember that. Or the mail I got where people were going to hang, they said, we're going to hang you from the foul poles. And I had to be walked out to security and radioed from one block to the next to make sure I got on the highway safely. They don't remember that or anything. So but my family knows, my family felt it. Yeah. So if they respect me for continuing on through all of that, and helping them get other opportunities in their lives, then, you know, I'm cool. You know, on my tomb, I told them already on my tombstone, whenever that happens, just put, don't worry about him. He was tired anyway.
Oh, man. Well, let me say thank you, first of all, for creating time. I know this is a busy season for you, so just being able to create the time to talk. But also thank you for your work ethic. Thank you for the consistent push to include so many others like yourself and others that might be different, to be able to have opportunity. And I think you said it rightly. No one really knows what you really go through, right? And so this is a part of that, is that to kind of tell that story, but also to know that you're enduring, like so many of our foremothers and forefathers, creates it and makes it just a little bit better for the next person. So thank you for being a living legend.
And thank you for being the same, because you are inspiring people every day. And you are that voice in some of these young people's head, especially, that says, no, I'm not going down that path. I'm going down this path. Yeah. And that should never be lost on anybody, you know, especially you.
Thank you.